Welcome to Know the Truth with Todd D. McDonald. I'm so glad you decided to listen to the podcast, and I hope you'll be encouraged by this week's sermon.
Worth the waste. What is it that you value? What is it that you value? Because if you cannot see the value in something, you feel like it's a waste. What's the point? And today in this message, we're looking at the story of a woman, and she placed value on someone, and that value that she placed on him made all that she did worthwhile. He was worth the waste. He was worth the waste. Look at this in Mark 14, 1 through 9. The Scripture says, after 2 days was the feast of the Passover, and of unleavened bread, and the chief priest and the scribes sought how they might take him by craft and put him to death. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar of the people. And being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious. And she brake the box and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves, and said, why was this waste of the ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and have been given to the poor. And they murmured against her. And Jesus said, let her alone. Why trouble ye her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For ye have the poor with you always, and whensoever ye will, ye may do them good. But me ye have not always. She hath done what she could. She is come aforehand to anoint my body to the burying. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. Now, we know that the Jewish religious leaders, and for some time we've been preaching, how that they were out to get Jesus. We know that they had in mind to destroy him. They had reached a point, they were ruthless in their plotting against him. They had death in mind. We see here that the one obstacle that was standing in the way was this feast. The Passover was coming. And so what we see is they were kind of lying in wait, looking for that opportune time that they could bring some kind of accusation against him, trap him, and that was what was in the minds of these adversaries. And we know that then the disciples must have had this on their mind, that every time they were going in and out of Jerusalem, it seems at this point they were staying in Bethany and going back and forth into Jerusalem, and every time they would get there, there was some kind of confrontation. And so Jesus' adversaries, they were out to get him. It is at this time, when they were in Bethany, there at the Mount of Olives, here at the house of Simon the leper. Maybe he was lodging with Simon at this point. But they were eating together, and a woman entered in among them to do something toward the Lord. She wasn't coming with handout to receive something, but rather to give something to him. You know, most of his ministry, when Jesus was going town to town and city to city, especially as his fame continued to grow and the news of his arrival would reach, he's on his way, what we see is people coming to him with handout. Lord, heal this one. Lord, I need an answer. Tell me. Lord, my My baby is diseased. My baby is sick. This one's near to death. Lord, this one is vexed. And so most of the time, people were coming for a healing or a miracle, a cure of some sort, an answer. People came to him from a desperate position, seeking help. But here, and we know that Jesus came into the world for that very purpose. When he went into the synagogue there and read from the gospel, he read from Isaiah. Let me get my mind on here. He read from Isaiah, and the Gospel of Luke tells us what he said in Isaiah. You know, that I'm anointed to a purpose, to preach the gospel to the poor. It was to bring recovery of sight. It was to release captives. It was a message of hope for those who were oppressed. And so we know that Jesus came to give himself and to minister to others. He came to liberate those who were downtrodden. But now we have a woman who's coming to him, and her desire is quite different. Rather than, Lord, give to me, she wanted to give something, a gift to the Lord. Most people, though, come out to Christ throughout his ministry crying, Lord, help me. Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, minister to my need. But on the other hand, this woman comes in with supplies in hand, and she's coming to perform a good deed toward the Lord, to bless him and to honor him in this home. Her actions were based on an attitude of appreciation. It was an attitude of worship within her. And it demonstrated something important for me, and we'll get to it in this message, but it demonstrates for me a holy affection for the Lord. She took what was an alabaster box of ointment, and she broke it and poured it on his head. It would seem to be quite a simple task, but to Jesus it had a profound significance. Now, why was this so important to Jesus? Now, we know a little later he says this was for my burying, but why is it such an important thing to Jesus? I have to believe it's because she placed such a high value on Jesus. He recognized in her that she values me, that I'm something of great worth to her. And so Jesus, as we'll see, was worth her expensive ointment. To others, it was a big waste. To those who were looking on, they saw in it a waste, but to her, he was worth the waste. And so my question I want us to think about this morning is, what is Jesus worth to you? What is Jesus worth to you? Is he worth your time? Is he worth your time? You're here today and that says something. But is he worth your time? This woman pursued Christ. I thought about what was the preparation in her coming to Jesus. For many, following Jesus is about convenience. If you think about it today, a lot of people follow Jesus, but it is a following of convenience where the Lord fits into their life. Where does he fit? He has to fit in with the rest of my life. Well, what was her preparation in coming to Christ? It is obvious it's not an afterthought here, but it was a priority. What she was doing had a priority to it, and that becomes apparent as we go through this message. She was at Simon's home for this particular occasion. And what was the occasion? It's because Jesus was there and she was seeking him out. And with great intent, for she brought with her something very important, an alabaster box in hand. Her presence had a purpose in it. And her actions were the premeditations of her heart toward Jesus. This is important because it has something to do with how we approach God, how we serve him. How was she serving him? Out of the premeditations of her heart. And so her being there made a difference because of what her intent and motives were. You have to wonder exactly what prompted her to do this, But it is clear she was not acting out of something spontaneous, but it was out of a forethought into her actions. What is it that I need to do? And something come over her that motivated and prompted her to take this action, and she came to Jesus in order to perform this honor and worship. For her, Jesus was worth her time and her efforts. So what is Jesus worth to you? Is Jesus worth your money? This woman brought an ointment. It's called spikenard or nard. It's this kind of perfume that I understand was imported from places like India that was brought in. And the Bible then explains it was very precious. There was an expense to it, a cost in this perfume. The guests that were there, these guests that were watching what was happening, their immediate reaction was, whoa, what is she doing? This was worth 300 pence or 300 denarii. And so the idea was that the guest said it was at least of that value. We don't know exactly how much she paid for it, but they knew from the market it was at least worth 300 pence. Now, I read where some estimate that this would be about $60. Some estimate this would be about $130 some odd dollars. But the point was, more than what it would be valued today, the point was, what was its value then? These kind of ointments didn't come cheap. What was its value? 300 pence. They said, oh, this might have been given to the poor. Now, 300 pence was much more valuable then than the $100 would be in our pocket today. Now, we might consider then this might be of a valuable amount. We might consider $100 certainly worth something. But the pence or the denarii at this time was a day's wage in the New Testament. 1 pence, 1 denarius was the value of a day's wages. Her ointment was actually then worth about a year's wages. How much do you make? How much do you make in a year? Well, it was to her a year's wage. This woman had either saved up a whole lot of money to purchase this, or someone had bestowed an expensive gift on her. Either way, she in her heart desired to give it to Jesus to honor him. So the question becomes, how much are we willing to spend on Jesus? How much are we willing to give to him? We spend our money on many things. You think, start taking an inventory. What do you spend your money on? Well, we buy a piece of land. Well, we buy some house or houses. We do our education. It's not cheap anymore to get educated. We buy cars. We buy food. Even a cheap car costs quite a bit. We buy food. We like good food. We like to eat it. How many like to go out and eat at a good restaurant? We like clothes. We don't want to wear rags. You want to wear some quality clothing. We want to take a trip. How many like to take a trip? How many like to hop in the car and go driving down the road and go somewhere and enjoy yourself a few days? We like to travel. We enjoy recreation. How many have hobbies here? You enjoy doing some things just for the fun of doing it. So we spend a lot of money, don't we? We spend money on our children. We spend money on our spouses. We spend money on our family, on our friends. We spend money on ourselves. We spend money in all sorts of places. And when we give to others and purchase especially gifts, what you give says something about how you feel. You don't go out and give some cheap gift to your wife. You better give her something that she sees as what? Valuable. Because it says something about how you feel. You got to know what people value. If you want to bless the Lord, you got to know what the Lord values. How much value then do we place on Jesus? Does our giving reflect his worth in our lives? Jesus was worth her money, her hard-earned money, or what was given to her. He was worth in her investment. And what is Jesus worth to you? Is he worth your sacrifice? She broke the box. She broke it. I had to look at that broke. Some translations say she broke the seal. The word it uses for broke, and there's different words. The broke here is the same word other places use crushed. In other words, it was ruined after she opened it. That's the idea. She broke it. And then it was to be used. She poured the ointment on Jesus' head, and based on the way then the Scriptures read, not only in the language, but what it's getting at, especially their reaction. If you look at the way it's saying it, she wasn't just putting a drop or two on his head. She poured out its contents. She broke the box and gave its contents to the Lord. All the contents. There's a message in that. She gave it all to the Lord. Her gift was sacrificial then. It cost her all. Sure, it could have been spent for the other purpose, as they said. What about giving it to the poor? Could have gone a long way to help a lot of people. That could have provided a lot to a lot of people that day. And that was the reaction. A year's wage could have made a difference. But the world is full of needs, and those needs will never, ever go away. Jesus said, "For ye have the poor with you always." Some would take that out of context and say, well, Jesus wasn't very sympathetic. He didn't have a lot of pity, did he? You have the poor with you always. But he wasn't saying the poor were unimportant or do not give them due consideration. Instead, he went on to say, whenever you will, you can do them good. He was not saying don't consider the poor, but what he is saying, the poor will never go away. There's always going to be someone on the bottom of the totem pole. And you can do for them anytime you want to. You can get up any day of the week and go help someone who's poor. But what he was saying, and the implication is, and you should. And you should help those less fortunate. But his point was this: you're not always going to have me around. I'm not always going to be here with you. And so here is the point. After the box was broken and poured out, it was all used up. This that was worth a year's wage was all used up once it was poured out. But she saw Jesus as worthy of her sacrifice. He deserved her precious ointment. What do you feel like Jesus deserves from us? What do you feel like he's deserving of in our lives? What is it that you feel like you have that maybe instead of you having it, he deserves it? These kind of questions is what probe your heart, your intent and your motives. What's he worthy of? Oh, well, the Lord saved me from eternal punishment. What's he worthy of then? Oh, the Lord radically changed my life. I'm not what I used to be. I'm a different person. Then what's he worthy of? God performed me. He healed me. God changed me. What's he worthy of? He deserved it. She could think of no greater purpose. What use could this have? Well, I suppose quite a few uses. There were multiple uses. Could have been used for burial. The fact that the seal wasn't broken possibly indicates that. I don't know. That it had a future purpose for it. I don't know. But it could have been used for some other purpose. But here she saw no higher cause than Jesus, the Son of God. He was worth her sacrificial gift. So the question is, what is he worth to you? Is he worth your affection? Over and against those who wanted to destroy to Jesus. And I think it's noteworthy it begins that way. Got these group of men that are still after Jesus. They're out to get him. But then over and against that, you have this woman. A vulnerable, weak woman. I don't mean that offensive, ladies. But over and against these heretic men, you have a tender-hearted woman. very tender. And we see this woman who wanted to do something, not against him to hurt him, but to bless and honor him. Yet she was completely misunderstood by her peers. You would have thought to those who were there, she would have been lumped in with the scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees, because they saw her as doing something out of order. Her intentions were not appreciated by those watching her. It is a fact the world surely does not understand your devotion to Jesus Christ. But sometimes even those closest, Matthew says his disciples, it was even some of his own disciples there. Even some of the most closest ones to us may not understand our dedication to him. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? I've heard that. I've heard those who said, why would you do that? And thankfully, I heard the right response, because I was doing it for the Lord. The world does not value Jesus as we do. He explained that the world hated him in John 16:18. And in fact, we shouldn't expect anything different. It is the Scriptures that have declared they hated me without a cause. Psalm 35:19 and 69:4. If we follow the Lord wholeheartedly, then rest assured we will be misunderstood at times. Don't always expect even your Christian brothers and sisters to understand when you serve the Lord wholeheartedly. This woman endured their murmurings against her actions, but Jesus said that she performed a good work. Something that he valued. A good work. What you do for the Lord is never in vain. Who could have known, who could have understood that what she was doing, the Lord would turn and say, this is for my burying. Before I even die, this is for my burying. Who would even have thought such a thing? But it was something that those looking on could not comprehend. But it is never in vain when it's for the Lord. It's never worthless when you place your affections upon the Lord. This is why when in church, if someone's motivation is for the Lord, never despise it. Never think it inappropriate if its affections are rightly motivated. When you do what you do because you love the Lord, it's never a waste, even if no one else gets it. While others questioned her, Jesus praised her for honoring him. This is like David. When they brought the ark back and he danced before the Lord, and his own wife despised him for it. But he did it unto the Lord. It's because his affection was toward God. In fact, when others questioned her and Jesus praised her, he went on to memorialize her affection. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. To her, Jesus was well worth the misunderstanding and the ridicule. He was worth the waste. So I want to close with this. Is Jesus worth your affection? Even when others do not understand your motives and actions, what is Jesus worth to you? This woman gave Jesus a precious possession. It was an expensive ointment, and her gift expressed one thing, how valuable Jesus was to her. What will you give Jesus to express his worth to you? What are you giving him? You see, Jesus isn't here physically. He's not here where you can say, here, Jesus, let me pour this on your head. The fact is, if Jesus was here, I think we'd all be bending over backwards to do something for him. But the point is, Jesus, hear his approach. When you've done it one to the least, you've done it to me. Jesus has done this. He's left us and said, now go out and do this to the world. So that everything you saw in him, Every teaching you see in Him, every action you see in Him, and every action that's performed upon Him, it's an illustration then of what the church is supposed to go and do now. And so we go and then we carry out these things, and we do it as what? Unto the Lord. So what are we going to give Him? What are we going to spend on Him? What are we going to sacrifice for Him? How are we going to display our affection toward Him? This is why the Lord says it this way: love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength. And the second is likened to it: love your neighbor as yourself. Because that's where your love gets focused out on an object, on someone. And there's where you spend it on the Lord. There's where you show the affection for the Lord. There's where you sacrifice for the Lord. That's where you place your affections on the Lord. And it's well-pleasing to God when we do. But more than anything, in the physical, in substance, in monetary, something tangible, more than anything, we must give our lives to the Lord. We have to give Him our heart and truly give Him our soul. And we do have to lavish Him with the abundance of all of our affections. He is the object of all of our affection. To give to Him, to love Him with all that is within us, and then let it flow out toward others to meet the needs of others.